a company CEO that records 100% of the meetings that happen in the company, every meeting. It goes into a small language model, and that's being used as a research basis for a lot of things. So it's a lot of clarity in that. Like, we have to be a little more careful in our meetings for what we say. The other one I thought was really interesting, just we do a lot of events, and there's a lot of logistics and management of those events, and there's a lot of technology involved now in that. Like, even you go to an event, you have a conference app. I was reading a newsletter today of someone who follows the event technology space, and he had just gone to HubSpot's inbound, and he'd asked them, what are you using for event technologies? And said, none. We actually went into Claude and told it what we needed. We have no programming experience, and we created our tools that are running this event. And I was like, wow, that's a wake-up call.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper. I'm the CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group, and I'm back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we like to break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean for you, and we talk about what you might do about them. So I've got an exciting show today. Joining me is RD Whitney. RD is the COO at the CFO Leadership Council. And I've also got my partner, Stacey Harris. She's the Chief Research Officer here at Sapient and also host of my sister podcast, Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, very saucy show. Welcome, RD and Stacey. I'm really excited about this show today because you guys know I love all things my background is in finance, so I love all things finance, HR that go together.
Great, happy to be here.
And it's an excited topic, and we'll be talking a lot about it this year, I think. So it is a lot to get into because the two worlds need to work better together, I think, right?
They do. Either that or they're going to collide, and we don't want that. We'd rather have integration. Yeah, so we recently announced that we are working together with the FATE event that's coming up this fall, and really excited to share some more information about that with our audience and what our plans are to try to bring HR and finance more closely together. So I was hoping we could talk about what's important, what we see as important to bring these two areas together, what we think the two areas need from each other, because I think that's a critical component. And, we need to really think about what we're presenting, but versus what we're receiving. So I was hoping that's what we could talk about today. Does that sound like a good plan to you guys?
Sounds great.
Yep.
All right, then let's get into the huddle. So RD, let's start with you because I want to tell the audience, first of all, a little bit more about you and also about the big event in November and what that's all about, because we may have some people listening that would like to attend that event and be part of it and learn more.
Great. Let me give a little bit of background just so you can see why the event made sense to launch and how it met demand. So I'm RD Whitney. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the CFO Leadership Council. That's part of something called a group called the Chief Executive Group, which started almost 2 decades ago with the purchase of Chief Executive Magazine, which had Bill Gates, Michael Dell, and lots of CEOs on the cover. And 2 brothers that I've been working with now for almost 30 years acquired that and very much professionalized and invested in it. So lots of events for CEOs, lots of tools and resources for CEOs, a bit lonely at the top. In order to get really unbiased information, it's not going to get that from solution providers or from your staff. The best place you're going to get that kind of information is from your peers. So much like YPO or Vistage, they had access to this great readership of CEOs. So they launched peer-to-peer networks for CEOs all across the country. And that's really the foundation of our organization. But then along came the New York Stock Exchange was selling Corporate Board Member Magazine. And, you probably wouldn't go launching a magazine today. It's a totally different world than it was 20 years ago. But as a basis for a community of trust, it has readers and people that want to reach the readers, events, oftentimes research. So we acquired that, and we have lots of events for public company corporate board members in the United States. We have a membership for them. We have a training program for being on a board. So it fit really nicely with CEOs. The third piece, the third leg of the stool, was CFOs. And we launched a magazine called CFO Leadership, which today reaches about 150,000 senior finance professionals across the country. And within that, we were able to acquire the CFO Leadership Council, which is the largest association of CFOs in the United States. Within that, we have a listserv where it's a trusted communication member to member asking questions. And about 3 years ago, I posted a question on there, much like we do with other issues, and said, if you share your tech stack, we'll help connect you with others that are, going down a similar path. Maybe you can learn from their successes or avoid their mistakes. And it was hugely popular. And we were really overwhelmed by the amount of technology being pitched to the CFO's office. And it wasn't just the stuff you would think about, like finance and accounting technology, but it was also HR tech and other issues that are going through the CFO office. So in order to address that, last October, we rented one of the largest convention centers in the United States, the Jacob Javits Center in New York City, and ran an event called FATE, the Finance Accounting Technology Expo. And we had over 1,000 attendees and 70 technologies with lots of learning theaters and great keynote speakers and what have you. We're practically doubling that this year. We're on track to have about 110 technologies, 5 learning theaters. We have some amazing keynotes, famous keynotes that will be opening up and bookending the conference. And just lots of learning, networking all around finance, accounting, technology, which just inevitably now encompasses things like HR tech, project management technology, or analytics. So it's all going through the CFO office, and we were surprised at how much it actually is.
Yeah, I think that's why this is particularly attractive to us to be a partner with you guys this year on this, is because we've gotten from the HR side people saying, how can we get more information about finance, right? And the finance tech. And from your side, how do we learn more about the HR side of it without getting into the nuts and bolts? Like, CFOs don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of HR technology, but they want to understand the real results that these things are going to provide. What's the innovation? I know that, my view of CFOs, and I think this bears out in some of the research that you guys did, was they're very focused on cost control and risk, right? But at the same time, in order to be a successful CFO, you have to be exploring innovation and long-term value creation, and you can't do that without people, right? So I'm curious, what your thinking is about the CFOs and that sort of people focus. How do we help them get more focused on the people equation versus, just being so focused on the one ROI number, which is what a lot of people, think the CFO is thinking about.
Yeah, no, I think there is a sort of stereotype on the CFO, which I think has changed a lot the past couple decades. The CFO now often is in the spot of succession to the CEO. They are so much more involved in strategy and people and issues related to that now. Oftentimes, depending on the size of the company, HR is reporting into the CFO office. And we mostly focus on that mid-market, which is where, like, if this was a pyramid, where the fattest part of this opportunity is and need is. So I think this is within the umbrella of the CFO office and their teams. I think they're keenly, I think, things like people, like one of the biggest issues with people is you can't recruit enough. You can't recruit them in the finance and accounting function. There's just not enough talent out there for all the opportunities that exist. But certainly companies are struggling to recruit across their companies. One of the solutions of that is technology, and we're particularly hearing a lot about this now with AI. But a lot of these technological implementations of these solutions can help your company scale through the use of technology, as opposed to through trying to recruit unrecruitable talent. But it also can be used to train talent to get them where you need them to be. So I think it is all interrelated: leadership, strategy, people, technology. And the CFOs, is at the steering the ship a lot of ways in that.
Yeah. And Stacey, we're seeing more vendors from an HR perspective look at how do we integrate with the financial side of this? How do we make these two things work better from a technology perspective so that they work better from a business and outcomes perspective, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think buying models go in cycles, right? So for the last 10 years, we've been in very much what we would consider a functional buying model, right? Where the functional role within the organization, whether that is HR, sales, marketing, or any other operational areas, sort of owns and manages their own sort of tech. And part of that was because a lot of that technology was evolving to better meet the processes and the best practices of those industries and those markets and the places they were serving. What's happened is that we commoditized a lot of that technology. Now, process-wise, they all tend to be very similar. There's maybe about 20% that's different in them. And at that point, then it becomes much more of a conversation about value, cost, risk, relationships, enterprise tech. And so I think what we're seeing is this uptick as we move into AI and as we move into sort of just rethinking the idea of enterprise-wide data, that the CEOs and the CFOs are getting much more involved in all the technology buying, but particularly in HR technology buying, because it touches 80 to 70% of our total cost if we're an organization that's running highly with people-based services or any kind of solution that requires people-based investment, right? So you're right, Teri. I mean, we're seeing, I think, an uptick in it. I think it's an uptick we would have expected. We were kind of watching where the market was heading. I know you and I have been talking about trying to find a way to better connect finance and HR for the last probably 3 years, really, since we first started having conversations. So when RD and the team kind of came to us, we were like, this is perfect timing for this conversation. I think the other thing that we're finding is because there's been a lot of functional silos across businesses, is the relationship between the CFO, the CHRO, the CIO, and the COO is not as strong as it needs to be. And that's the one that I know that we're really wanting to try and get to, is not just what do you need to know, how do you need to be educated, but how do you fix that relationship? Because the CEO is looking to all of them to work together to figure out what the future looks like with this new world we're in, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And RD and I, just right before you joined, Stacey, in the pre-show, we were talking about AI and just the impact that that's having on things. And even more so now with, bringing these groups together, because AI is not a technology play. It's not a resource play. It's all of these things. And there's got to be some strong translation strategies between these functional, I won't call them silos because many of them do work very closely together, but we're all sort of on the AI front, we're all sort of reaching for, like, what's the thing we should do? Where should we focus? What should we spend our money on? What should we organize our resources around? RD, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, are you starting to see these groups talk about and come together more around this topic?
Yeah. So our parent company focuses on those three groups: corporate board members, chief executive officers, and CEOs. And we do hundreds of events around the country throughout the year. So we have lots of conversations with them. And this is no longer just like, let's try a pilot project. There are substantial reinventions of the company because of this.
Yeah.
And I think you're exactly right. It's not really necessarily technology. It's more of a cultural change. Just as being head of operations in my group, one of the things I do with our operations team, we just had our call this morning, is I've been challenging them to reach out to colleagues and associations and kind of understand, like, what are exact examples of the technology being deployed in your area of focus. And so the one that came up today was, well, there were a few. One had gone out and heard about a company CEO that records 100% of the meetings that happen in the company, every meeting. It goes into a small language model, and that's being used as a research basis for a lot of things. So it's a lot of clarity in that. Like, we have to be a little more careful in our meetings for what we say. The other one I thought was really interesting. Just, we do a lot of events, and there's a lot of logistics and management of those events, and there's a lot of technology involved now in that. Like, even you go to an event, you have a conference app. So I was reading a newsletter today of someone who follows the event technology space, and he had just gone to HubSpot's inbound, and he'd asked them, what are you using for event technologies? And said, none. We actually went into Claude and told it what we needed, we have no programming experience, and we created our tools that are running this event. And I was like, wow, that's a wake up call, right? Like everything is changing, and we don't know which way it's going to go. Like search itself could be changing, and I don't think Google knows where it's going to go. They're investing in both sides, right? It's such an interesting time. So we run our functions the way we do on lots of solution providers that are adapting very quickly to take advantage of this. And I do think that's probably going to be part of the answer, is that they're integrated inside of things that we use. But we're also drowning in everybody bringing in their own tool and using their own tool. How do we manage that across the company? And at what point does it get simplified more? Because it's becoming a point of exhaustion, I think.
Yeah, the bring your own AI conversation, I think, is being subsumed right now a little bit between the sort of enterprise conversation and what we can do with the data. But our data this year is definitely going to prove out that bring your own AI is probably a bigger reality than most organizations. I think they all know it. You know what you're bringing yourself to it, but then what they have really sort of thought through and how they're going to manage that at the enterprise level. So it's interesting to hear, RD, that you guys are seeing some of that same conversation, just at a different perspective, right?
Yeah, and if we don't get our arms around it, there's a lot of intellectual capital leakage, right? That could be walking out the door by using tools that are not, internal LLMs, right?
Yeah. And I think being in the seat of the CFO and their team, like this is very stressful because they're being bombarded with messaging. Everybody's got the right solution. And I sometimes just think of my own wife, was a controller at a really interesting company, and she had to make some decisions. And the first thing she focused on was expense management, and put in a tool that really got them right up to date financials, because of the fact that there was just so much spending happening in so many different parts of the country, and they needed to kind of get their arms around that in real time. And so that was great. And then they looked at HRIS as a second thing, because they had lots of team that they manage, and you get some self-serve in there and things like that. Sometimes the best customer service is no customer service, like Amazon taught us, like just make it really intuitive. And what she picked didn't do what they said it would do. And, and I know they're struggling with that. Like, that's what we want to help people avoid. Like, the right solution isn't the same solution for everyone out there. The 2,000 people that will be at our show in November, like, they all have different needs and custom needs. And as much as the solutions want to say, like, this fits everything, it doesn't. And then a lot of times it's industry focus, size focus, specialty focus, and picking the right team, and picking the right tools and how those tools work with each other, I think is so critical. And it needs education. How could you have done this before? You could have done web searches. Like, you could have gone to Capterra and made yourself a list, or G2, or you could go to a group like Gartner and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars with an analyst. So we want to just, I remember, just not to get off tangent, but I remember there was this great advertiser I'm from New Hampshire, so it was from the Boston area. And it was this Sims clothing. And their saying was, an educated consumer is our best customer. And like in the software industry, I mean, that really plays itself out. It's like, the more educated you can be, the better customer you can be, because you're going to be a better fit for the solution that you provide.
Yeah. You have to be very careful with the bright, shiny demos, and you really have to know what it is you want out of it and make sure that you get those questions answered. I'm curious, RD, where do you typically see, and I know this differs by size of org and it differs by just the company culture probably, but in general, where do you typically see the CFO sitting in the HR tech buying process?
They're fully involved. When we were kind of starting this, we hired an independent research group just so we didn't have our own bias in it. And we clearly saw that, particularly in the mid-market, they are highly involved in this decision. They are at the table. They are probably the ultimate decision maker, but their team is highly involved, depending if HR is part of that, together with that function or not. But yeah, they're definitely highly involved in the decision.
And that's what we see, right, Stacey, from the data even.
Yeah, our data basically shows kind of a pretty even split depending on the application area and the space, right? Payroll, without a doubt, right? There's no doubt that payroll and core HR, we're definitely seeing benefits even that the CFO is highly involved, or someone in the accounting space, or someone who's in that role, or an IT conduit between the two, right? Particularly as organizations get larger, those roles kind of shift around a little bit, but the CFO or the accounting department is somehow involved in the work that's being done. What interests me is that, when we first started having our conversations, already to Teri's point, there was this natural sort of interest on both sides to sort of understand better what each group was doing. But I also thought, once we started talking about sort of crossover topics like the roundtables that we're going to be doing this year at your guys' event, there's also sort of areas like planning where it isn't just crossover, we need to work with each other, but where our data needs to sort of tightly sync up to get a better answer for the company, right? And, I think those are some of the things that are also intriguing to this, is that it's not just the tech decision, but it's also the process that underflows that technology and how those two worlds work together, and understanding how you need to sort of share that data picture across the two of them. That's just as important as the features and functions of any specific software, right?
Yeah, and one of the things, sneak peek here for the data, I mean, we're definitely for the second year in a row seeing business outcomes are down slightly from what they've been in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is a big challenge, I think, for where, I mean, CFOs and CEOs right now are really driving for, the top thing we're definitely seeing is that they're driving for either company growth from a revenue perspective or a market share perspective, but they're also looking for operational efficiencies, right? So the kind of, we're seeing this dynamic growing out. Like if we ask them what's their top 3 initiatives for the next 12 months, and corporate, revenue growth and operational efficiency were sort of one and 2 in that conversation. RD, I'd be really interested in knowing, as you're talking to your audience and you're getting ready for this event, how are they balancing the fact that they're being asked to sort of grow and be more efficient at the same time? It's an interesting thing that we're seeing in our data on how they're managing that. But I think the finance office is very involved in that right now, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's never been a year of so much change and uncertainty, tariffs, and just so many things facing companies. So I think they've been getting all that thrown at them at the same time, worrying about inflationary forces and things like that. But I mean, even it's just interesting to see some of the reporting coming out where the inflation doesn't seem to be coming through. You wonder how much that is with the technology part, like AI coming in and like this stuff comes out after how companies are really implementing the technology to find productivity. Productivity is like the magic thing that happens in companies that deliver bottom line results. So, sometimes you don't need to put so much focus on the top line if you can focus on the productivity you're going to get, earnings. I think they're trying to balance it all. Like, I think, they're trying, and also sort of, where they are in their stage. Is there recapitalization at some point? Is there, are you acquiring? Are you going to be acquired? So they have all these things to deal with. But the thing that it's pretty hard to argue is, like, you can bring productivity into your company and make your operations more efficient. That's better for your customers. That's better for your bottom line. That's better for your company. That helps deal with the talent shortage that is not going to go away. So I think we're just living in the early ages of, automation and innovation that we're trying to find the benefits from.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the leaders at the C-suite level, the CFO, the CHRO, the CIO, the COO, I mean, they all have their remits, right? We know what their focus should be, and those things normally should work together to get to success. But I think I really think the AI component has created a lot of confusion, and, people are not sure where it sits, right? And I think even at the CEO level, they're like, it depends on the CEO, right? They might be saying to the CFO, make sure we don't go over budget on this. Another one might be saying to the CHRO, you need to figure this out because this is all about people and how we're going to organize this business and how many people we need and all this kind of stuff. And then another one that's like the CIO, this is a technical play, you need to get in there and lead this and figure this out. And so I think there's a lot of like confusion and sort of people trying to figure out who's going to take the lead, who's not afraid to take the lead for starters. Because I think, there's always those things that you don't feel like you know enough about to take the lead, but sometimes you just have to step up and say, I'm going to take the lead, and I know where I need to be. But I'm seeing that as sort of a challenge right now for organizations is who's on first.
Mhm.
Yeah. And there's also the existential threat that wasn't there before. Like, is my business even going to be relevant in 5 years? Like,
Yeah.
because so many things are we're at the we're hearing about so many things potentially being reinvented. Like, is our value proposition still solid? Like, so you're having to think of that while you're trying to have to think about top line and bottom line and people and efficiency and all these things. So it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, RD, I mean, if you had to sort of have one word of recommendation or a couple words of recommendation for the vendors who are servicing this industry, and particularly who are in the HR space but trying to speak to the CFO because it's a newer audience for them, what would you say they need to really focus on in those conversations? Because I think we get that question a lot, and we have some perspective based off of our data. But I'd be interested because you're talking to the CFO office all the time, and even the CEO office. What do you think they have to really focus on?
Get to know your customer. And that's why we do so many in-person live events. Is that's the best way. So at a place like Fate, like our attendees, the senior finance professionals, are coming because the best way for them to learn is through peer-to-peer interaction, and lots of opportunity for that to happen and to learn from your peers and to hear what's happening. But another great way to learn is from the solution providers, because they're in the trenches every day working with all different types of customers. So we give them the stage to be able to share some of that experience. But then what's really important for vendors is to get to know the details of that customer so that they can really make sure that it's a match, not just on the marketing flyer, but like, does this work in, a small manufacturing company, in this geography with this many people, with this as its, driving revenue source? Does this work? Does this make sense? And am I heading down a good path that the plugins will work with it? The things we're already kind of addicted to, like, do we have to back out of stuff in order to be able to go in this direction? So I think getting to know your customer is key.
Yeah. What would that guidance be to, so that's more of to the vendors, and a very good point. I mean, if you're a good salesperson, you know the C-suite and you know who to be talking to about and how to be persuading them. But when you're talking to CHROs, so CFO to CHROs, do you have some thoughts or some ideas of ways to bridge what those two groups care about? Because they do care about very different things, and they're oftentimes talking in cross purposes, right? How do we bring them to that same sort of data point that's gonna excite the CFO and solve the CHRO's challenge?
Yeah. I it's just,
The magic bullet.
yeah, doing things that help them align, which if you think about, like, sort of, I mean, I remember somebody telling me I had founded a business and was at the end stage of the business selling it, and said, it's really all about the people that make you want to sell your business. And that was the continuation of it. And I it's a joke, but HR deals with people, and why do people get frustrated was because processes are messed up, or things are unclear. But if you can give people great processes, great technology, great clarity, job satisfaction goes way up, productivity goes way up. Those are, isn't that all mad music to the CFO's ears, right? Like, I think they just have to find their common points of alignment, which is that productivity. And
Yeah, I like that a lot. We oftentimes talk about what metrics are shown at the executive level from the HR side, and productivity is not one of the top metrics, which right. That is exactly where HR should be having that conversation. And so I think that's a very good call out that's where the conversation should be heading for the CFO. One of the things I think that's really interesting about this event, one of the things we're sort of excited about, is that you are talking about not just being it is definitely a finance event for finance professionals, but you are interested in bringing the HR to that audience as well to have those joint conversations. And I think that's the other thing that we're seeing, is that the more you talk, the more you hear from each other, the more you do understand. You have a lot of the same issues. You're just looking at it from the opposite side of the coin, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So bringing that together, I think, helps solve some of that bridging that we just discussed. There are HR technology, lots of HR technology events. You don't see a lot of finance professionals at those. So, but this is an opportunity, I think, to create that bridge. So, we're thrilled with our partnership with Sapient, and I think the roundtables will be a really good opportunity for that discussion to start and grow over the years.
Yeah, I do know, and this is true at that level with anyone, like they learn from their peers. And oftentimes if you're just sitting in a room with your direct peers, you're missing the ideas from other parts of the business, right? Like other CFOs are great to a point, right? You learn from them, but then you've got to sit next to the CHRO and the CIO and really understand their business. And the same with the CHRO. I mean, you can't walk in there and say, I need more people because our people are stressed out. Like you need the data, you need hard data, right? And it's there. The data is there. It's really just about how do I get access to it, and how do I make how do I make the right case to whoever it is that's holding the purse strings, but we know it's oftentimes at the CFO level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we've talked a lot about AI. Are there any other trends, RD, that you see that are going to, sort of bring CFOs and HR more closely together, in the next 2 to 3 years, things that you see that are tied to automation or analytics and other forms of decision making that have got to be in place in order to make the business successful?
I don't think this is a new trend. I think this has probably been going on a long time, but the cost of a mistake in this area is huge, and that oftentimes gets overlooked. Like, what if this goes wrong? And that makes everybody's life more difficult and can really hurt the company. It can shut down the company if it's done poorly. So I think that only strengthens the need to bring the groups together more to really make sure they're making the right decision for their company. They used to remember the old saying, you can't get fired by bringing in IBM, I think it was, or something like that.
Yeah.
But, you really, it's so impactful, the decisions that you may be making to bring into company, but really have to do it. You have to go in this direction if you can't really find or train the talented people to do it with humans. And, if some of that stress that's on the jobs and causing bad retention marks is because the systems and operations are less clear and efficient than they can be, then you can really, get a couple goals with one shot here. You can help in retention, you can help employee morale, you can help the efficiency of the company, you can help productivity. So yeah, that's the trend. It's not a trend, but I just think it's becoming even more surfaced as cost of making a bad decision and what you can do to make sure you don't. And I think it comes down to talking with peers, learning from the solution providers. They have so much to share, but hearing through the marketing and really getting to know them and learn from them.
Yeah, that's a huge point. And I think what that comes down to is who's willing to, it's almost like that can freeze people. And I think in some ways in the AI conversation right now, people are somewhat frozen in like, I'm afraid to make a bad decision, right? So yeah, there has to be accountability, right, for those decisions. And so all the more reason to, make sure that when you're having these conversations, you've got the right information and good information, and you can justify the decision that you made. Yeah.
And Teri, I might also add where we're seeing crossover, at least in the data on this side from a topical perspective, that I think everybody thinks payroll, right? Like the first thing, they were HR or where finance and HR sort of do crossover and where the big trend is. But we're seeing a lot of interest in total rewards, compensation, and reward tools. Finance are getting a lot more involved in that. We're seeing finance a lot more involved in the benefits conversation, because that's really important to a lot of the board members. And so I think thinking about sort of who wants to speak to that finance audience is important, because it is not just payroll. It's not just, the traditional ones you would think about, right? Like we're definitely seeing benefits and compensation. And we're also seeing, I think, which was sort of interesting because you had mentioned it, RD, was that idea of engagement, right? Like finance is very interested in engagement because it tends to lead to productivity. We've been saying this for years, right? But we haven't always sort of put sort of an investment in making sure that finance is part of that conversation because they're very invested in productivity. So those are the ones that we're seeing sort of show up where finance is we're seeing their interest and their involvement in the financial decision for that solution growing in the data set this year, which I think is sort of intriguing because it lends to a lot of things you talked about, RD. Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of surprising interest in the CFO leaning into healthcare. So it's one of the most expensive line items. And I think, up until pretty recently, it was like, oh, well, that's just going to keep going up. There's not much you can do about it, but don't touch the healthcare plan because people might quit. But, and keep companies of size, they have self-insurance and they're in groups and they've got that, they've got the, the right deals in place and things like that. But the mid-size, they don't know about a lot of these options. And a lot of these options involve benefit tech and its tie into the system. And, you could spend all you want on a benefit like that. And if you're not delivering it to your customers, your employees, well, they're not taking advantage of it and they're frustrated and they might leave and other things. So it all does tie together. I think total rewards and sort of the benefits area is very much in focus in the CFO's office, and another area where HR and finance need to work together.
Yeah. That I think that one's critical, right? Because that's not where the money is not in payroll. Like payroll just happens. The money is, what are the decisions you're making around how much you're going to pay and what benefits you're going to bring into the organization? I mean, that's really where the decisions can impact the bottom line. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that comp is an important place to be.
It's one of Teri's favorites, if you hadn't guessed.
Yeah, I know I said I started in finance, but I really cut my teeth in comp, so got a long history there. Well, we're really excited about the event, RD. We've got some great vendors who are going to partner with us at the event, and we really plan to bring some great information to the CFO level and sort of help them as much as we can understand this space and how they can best interact within it and be a part of it and understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're going to have some fun there too. So first of all, the whole thing is getting kicked off by Marcus Lemonis, who, if you ever saw the show, The Profit, he was famous for that. He's been sort of reinventing businesses and CEO himself. We have a finance and accounting focused comedian, and he sent me his video. And I heard one of the first things was he's asking the question if it's appropriate to bring up EBITDA at a first date. So things like that. We're going to have a themed cocktail reception in the late afternoon, early evening of day one, which will be a lot of fun. Food, tchotchkes, themes. I can't give it away yet, but it's going to be a blast. We've got a great, very sought after speaker keynoting as well that had protected many of the presidents of the United States. And we have the former coach of Michael Jordan at UNC as well, talking about leadership and teamwork. So all around this finance, accounting, HR tech discussion is a real chance to get out of the office and kind of, reset and think about how all this can apply to the challenges you're facing.
Yeah. And the dates, we should probably make sure we let everybody know the dates that the event is. It's November 13th and 14th, correct? And
that's right.
You said in New York, right?
Yeah, at the Jacob Javits Center in New York. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want tickets, get in touch.
Yeah.
We'll get you there. We'd love to have you there. I think it'll be a great opportunity to see how, we start talking about these things on more common ground, and it'll be a very interesting perspective all the way around. I can't wait.
One other element that I forgot to mention is there's just so much new happening every day. Probably just since we've been on this podcast, is probably a new company invented. We started last year with this, but the fellow who runs South by Southwest Pitch Stage is a friend of mine, and his company helped us launch and manages our pitch stage at Fate. So we have 4 categories, and you can sit there and hear the pitches to the investors of these companies that will make a difference in the future. One last year got some funding from Google, but I think that's really interesting too, like what's coming and how soon is it coming. So that's another element that you'll see at the show. And I think just in general, it's worth following about what's happening in the
That's a great
ecosystem.
point, RD. If you are someone listening out there and you have a product that you would like to pitch, also get in touch because we have an application process for that. And there's a lot, like you said, RD, there's a lot of new startups. I feel like it's 1999 all over again.
It really does. Yeah.
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 Well, this is awesome. Appreciate you being on the show today, RD. Where can people find you online and on social?
Great. LinkedIn, RD Whitney. So, and my email address is rd@cfolc.com. That's rd@cfolc.com, CFO Leadership Council.
Awesome. Hopefully people will see some people at the show and they'll mention that they heard this podcast. Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode. I want to thank Stacey. Thank you for joining us and adding to this conversation. I want to thank our producers, the Brand Method Media Group. That's Kelly's team. They do a great job of getting our podcast out there to you guys. Our marketing team, a whole group of people that are making this great. And thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it. We'd love to hear more from you about the topics that you want to hear about. So if you have a topic, let us know, drop us a line on the website, leave us a review, subscribe so that you get notified when these episodes come out. And also don't forget to listen to next week's episode where Stacey and Cliff spill the tea on HR tech. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of this podcast, HR, We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.